Artificial Intelligence and the Electoral College. Garbage in, garbage out. The artificial intelligence is large language model takes in language, either already print text or uh, talk that's translated into text, and puts things together. However, when it comes to the Electoral College, and I've been looking at this for a week, uh, there's so much false information about the Electoral College, especially its origins, that I didn't get a single correct answer on AI. So it's not AI's fault, though. I think it's just that it's reading false. So it kind of shows the problem with the system. Now there are no mysteries about when and why the Electoral College was first proposed on July 19th, 1987, at America's Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. The Electoral College was debated, later approved by the convention, later ratified in state by state conventions, each with their own debates. The Electoral College recruited George Washington. George Washington didn't run for president. No one ran for president. That's the way the original system was set up. That's why the Electoral College was invented, to identify. See, they met, they talked about things, they identified and recruited presidential candidates. It's exactly the opposite of now. In 2008, I was one of the 538, that is, members of the Electoral College for Obama Biden. I had to pledge to vote for Obama Biden. I did not discuss it with my fellow members of the Electoral College. We did not seek out and recruit anybody to be president. The political party had already decided. It's what we have now is totally different. In fact, in many ways, the opposite of America, what we originally decided and what the Electoral College was created to do. I've been unable to find any AI program that will acknowledge this fact, no matter how I phrase the inquiries. William Paterson of New Jersey made the first motion to have the president chosen by a specially selected group of electors, a special HR body in modern terms. He called them electors. This occurred on July 19th, 1787. Now, how do I know that? Well, there's notes of the convention. And Madison was not the only person who kept notes of the Constitutional Convention. There were 13 persons who kept considerable notes. Madison was the only one there every day and kept notes every day. But there was an official note keeper appointed by the convention, William Jackson. Now later, Max Farrard put all these notes together. They ended up being in 4 volumes, and in more recent years, James Hutson collected even more notes, so there are 5 volumes. I did make copies of how I bought them from Amazon, although I have other copies I didn't buy on Amazon. But I have them and I've read them. All sources agree that the Electoral College was first discussed in the convention on July 19, 1787, and the first person to make a motion to adopt the Electoral College as the manner of selecting our president was William Paterson of New Jersey. Now, there were other motions that day. So here's the Google AI. And It claims, it's inaccurate state, William Paterson introduced the Electoral College. So the Google here, the Google AI, starts talking about irrelevancies. He didn't first introduce the Electoral College in the New Jersey plan. Now, then it talks about years afterwards. The Electoral College was outlined in Article 2 of the Constitution as the 12th Amendment. Well, 12th Amendment doesn't come along until 1804. I'm asking it questions specifically about July 19, 1787. It just ignores me. And it's not just Google AI. Okay, Oliver Ellsworth, who was later our third Chief Justice, made the amended motions that led to a temporary affirmative vote. Now, throughout the whole convention, May, June, and July 19th, the Congress would elect the president. In most states, their chief executive, the governor, was elected by their state legislature. Governors swore to see that the laws created by the legislature were faithfully carried out. It was presumed for most of the convention that the national legislature, the Congress, would recruit and elect the president. There's no democracy here. I mean, you elect your representatives because they know who will be suitable to be president. You don't have any idea. This is not your field. The House and the Senate would elect the president. Now, residue of that from the original Constitutional Convention still exists. If the Electoral College fails, the House, voting by state, elects the president, while the Senate elects the vice president. So after July 19th, they debate and they discuss both in the convention and in the taverns outside of the convention among each other. And they vote, and on July 24th, the Electoral College vote failed. The Congress would recruit and elect the president. Now, on July 17th, this is earlier, they have voted on a different matter. Should the U.S. president be elected by a direct vote of citizens? And what we generally refer to as the president was during the convention often referred to as the chief magistrate. Direct election by citizens received one and only one affirmative vote. Everyone else voted against it. Mason of Virginia spoke for nearly everyone when he declared it would be unnatural to refer the choice of a chief magistrate to the people as it would to refer to the trial of colors to a blind man. At no time in the convention or the state-by-state ratifying conventions or in the early elections were the common citizen, who were those that were eligible to vote, which were property-owning white men, and only about half of them at that, would have anything to do with selection of the president. This was a republic. They would elect the people who would decide who would be president. The idea was to protect the president from the whims of the people, the opposite of what we have now. The idea of looking at a poll of what people think is just the opposite of what they wanted. I mean, this wasn't unknown. They discussed it. They said, no, we don't want that. We don't want a president responding to popular polls. There was no citizen vote at all for president until a non-binding referendum during the 10th U.S. election for president in 1824. It's a quote. Although it had no bearing on the outcome of the election, popular votes were counted for the first time in this election, 1824. I retrieved that, and this was, I retrieved it first in 2012. I wrote a book. I did it again when I revised the book. This is from the History Channel on this day, October 12, 2016. So it's not just me talking on a YouTube video in 2025. You can look it up yourself. Until Andrew Jackson's 1824 election, the 10th election, American citizens waited to learn who the Electoral College recruited and chose for president, the way the Roman Catholics today wait to learn who the College of Cardinals will elect a pope. Now, I did publish a book, self-published on Amazon, sold one copy in 1 year, and I unpublished it. I submitted it to Penguin, and they rejected it. So very quickly, I submitted on a Friday afternoon, and on Monday morning, I got a rejection email from the office of the executive editor. So presidents were not to be democratically elected. Now, had the Constitutional Convention ultimately voted against the Electoral College, then the Congress would have recruited and elected presidents. I make an analogy here in this Substack post. Pete Rozelle was recruited and elected to be NFL commissioner. He was recruited and elected by the team owners. Now, you didn't have outside interests, special interest groups having conventions and primaries and elections to say, hey, this guy's going to be the NFL commissioner. You don't want the fans deciding who's going to be commissioner. Similarly, what we have now was actually discussed and rejected in 1787 and in the ratifying conventions. They wanted a small group of specially educated by either education or experience to be members of the Electoral College who would recruit and select the president. So, not long before the end of the convention, August 24th, 1787, the convention voted for the Electoral College. Now, as I said, there's 13 groups of sets of notes, and they all agree on this. Now, when the first Electoral College voted, they nominated 12 names. Then they sent the Secretary of the Senate, Charles Thompson, rode his horse to Mount Vernon in Virginia to ask George Washington, whose name was first on the list, if he would accept the job. They didn't know if he would say yes. If he had said no, Thompson was to ride to Boston and ask John Adams if he would accept the job as president. If he said no, Thompson was to ride to New York and ask John Jay if he would accept the job as president. That was the limit at the time. Top 3 vote receivers. 12 people received Electoral College votes. So Washington said yes, Adams became vice president, and Jay became the first Chief Justice of the United States. Now, one big, very big reason that the Electoral College passed was that it gave smaller states a greater representation per capita in the vote for president. This was expressly discussed, decided, and approved in the Constitutional Convention and in the state-by-state ratifying conventions. There are, I don't know if they're dupes, fools, or just enemies of America today are pointing out this as if it was a bad thing and act as if they just now discovered it through math. This was fully discussed not only in the convention, but in the state-by-state ratifying conventions. It was always public. It was always approved in the public interest to prevent the large states from always winning, forcing their desired candidate on the small states. The small states have a bigger vote on a per capita basis on purpose, because we didn't create a democracy, we created a republic. And the fight all along was small states versus large states, not Democrats versus Republicans. This came along more than a century later. Also, it's public when people vote in Congress. It was also public for almost the first 100 years of America, almost until the 20th century. Votes were public. There was no secret ballot. So, when I was a candidate for Kansas Secretary of State, I wanted a pilot project of a public ballot in some locations. Of course, I wasn't elected, so that never got tried. But I think there should be no secret ballot now. But I seem to have the minority view on that. But that's what we had when America was created. The Constitutional Convention was public. The only vote common citizen had was for their local member of the House of Representatives. They voted for members of the House. Their state legislatures voted and elected the senators. The Electoral College elected the president, recruited and elected the president. They would send the Secretary of the Senate to go ask the top vote receivers if they would accept the jobs, president and vice president. Much different now, and it's not better now. It is not. You think we have this entire millennium, do you think we've had the absolute best candidates and presidents and vice presidents? You really think that? Artificial intelligence, everyone I looked at, they didn't even seem to understand the question when I'd ask about the Constitutional Convention.